All right, hey people. Today is March 1st, 2022. My name is Chris Lucas. It's almost 7 o'clock a.m. here in Indiana in the USA. Just got off work after working about 12 hours and then prepped for this video for about maybe an hour. Just wanted to play some clips, give a few thoughts about some things going on because I got some pretty interesting information. You know what? Let me start with the one piece that no one probably knows, and I still got to check into this, but I mean, normally this guy never, plays any disinfo or anything. So this is I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Theoria Apophasis, I think is what it's on YouTube. But anyway.
By the way, before getting on to the main thing about Russia, I'd like to know your thoughts on the fact that the Food and Drug Administration told many of its top execs, it'd be employees, to gas up their vehicles and go buy food. I've received confirmed information from several people that work at large banking institutions that they should do the same, and that they should brace for a cyber attack within the next few days, if not less. Whether that happens or not, I have no idea. And I'm not a Chicken Little, the sky is falling, doom and gloom person at all, but I just wanted to put that out there. Also, too, before getting on to Russia and Ukraine, has anybody noticed that nobody's talking about the coup anymore?
Very well. So the main thing I wanted to play was just that whole thing about the Food and Drug Administration telling people to telling their employees they might want to stock up on food in case there's a cyber attack. And let's see here. Okay, and then I found this pretty interesting clip.
The rest of us that aren't Ukrainians, I think the world, quite frankly, Kira, is surprised by the will of the Ukrainian people to stand up and fight. Are you?
Well, I'm not surprised. We have been fighting Putin for the last 8 years, and we had 3 revolutions in our country when we did not agree with what was going on with the direction of where we're moving in. But right now, it's a critical time because we know that we not only fight for Ukraine, we fight for this new world order for the democratic countries. We knew that we are the shield for the Europe.
For the rest of us that aren't Ukrainians, I think the world, quite frankly, Kira, is surprised by the will of the Ukrainian people to stand up and fight. Are you?
Well, I'm not surprised. We have been fighting Putin for the last 8 years, and we had 3 revolutions in our country when we did not agree with what was going on with the direction of where we're moving in. But right now, it's a critical time because we know that we not only fight for Ukraine, we fight for this new world order for the democratic countries. We
fight for this new world order. I got friends tell me, let's go kill those commie Russians. And, I just don't buy into this. These same people were locking you down, destroying your businesses, ruining your life. And we were all calling them tyrants. But suddenly these tyrants all care about your freedom. And now they're saying, hey, let's go fight for the new world order. That's basically what you're doing when you're getting involved in this whole Russian-Ukraine thing. It's like if you want to go fight on the side of Ukraine and give them a bunch of weapons and all that, it's basically, the more I look into this, and I cannot, it's real hard for me to believe Putin's the bad guy. Okay, because I know there's a whole elaborate plot. Some people are like, oh, this is all a stage, and Putin's playing his role, and he's a young global leader and part of the World Economic Forum, and this is all stage, and he's playing his part. Okay, if maybe that could be happening, I don't know. But I do know one thing. We need to stay out of that war. And me personally, right now, I'm okay. I'll entertain that theory because I mean, I wonder about that too. I feel like things are pretty controlled, but at the same time, I've had my whole life where I'm watching Rocky movies and like the Red Dawn Rising movies, and all this other stuff, man, where it's like Russia's the enemy. I had that, crammed down my throat ever since I was a child. Um, I mean, I remember, they're telling me about a nuclear attack, and see, when I'm a little kid, it's like, oh, the alarms are going off. Get up under your desk, kids. I go crawl up under my school desk, right, to save me from a nuclear bomb that might go off. It's like, for any kids that are listening now, it's kind of like the mask of the 80s, or I'm not sure how long it was going on, but when I was going to school and that was happening, it was during the early 80s. And so it's kind of like the equivalent of the safety mask. You put the safety mask on and it protects you from a virus. You climb up under a desk, it protects you from a nuclear bomb. So and we'd go practice that like almost like weekly at least, and they'd turn the alarms on, and it's like, go kids, climb up under your school desk, there's a nuclear bomb coming. And so I go home, it's like, wow, hey, we did this at school today, mom. And then they explained to me that any day now these Russians might, send nuclear missiles at us. So I like grew up in this propaganda, being beat down my head, down into my brains, and I can't help but wonder, as I'm like watching how much reality's inverted around me, and people tell me, there's this certain injection that's safe and effective, and it doesn't look like it to me, and it's like, I grew up, where someone's like, man, that's a bad car, and I'm like, or a bad bicycle, and I'm like, whoa, and I'm a little kid, I'm like, oh man, why do you think that's bad? And they go, nah, man, it's like cool, it's good, and it confused me. And the Bible's got this part in it that says, don't call evil good and good evil. And I really feel like this whole world is, it's just like, it's constantly doing that. It's like, man, that's a sick record. And it's like, I think it's a good record. Nah, man, I mean, like, sick, it means cool, man, it's groovy. And it's like, it's like good. And, it's like people kind of like invert everything, it's in this whole world. And I just, I never noticed it until like I kind of, I guess, came to the truth of the Bible when I was about 26 after going through all this new age stuff and everything for a few years, and atheism, agnosticism, because I was totally disillusioned about everything in the world. And, started reading the Bible, and then it's like, things like all of a sudden clicked to me. And I just started realizing, like how much everything is inverted, how much, and like actually, it was almost overwhelming to me, because I'm like, wow, everything seems evil around me. Is this world really this evil, this messed up? And then it's like I kind of like pulled myself away from it because I'm like, I thought I was nuts, like, I mean, I thought I was like crazy to think like, what, this whole world is like that, I mean, this is like, I'm like noticing just how just depraved everything is, and people don't even notice it, and don't even understand, what kind of like lies and inverted reality they're just in. And, with all this COVID stuff, it just really kind of like made me, go, hey, whatever I saw when I first, like, I don't know if you want to call it got saved or whatever. But it's like whatever I saw at that moment after like a few months of reading the Bible and everything, it's like that to me seems like what everything actually is. So I don't know, kind of started to get on that rant, but so anyway, we see her saying, we fight for this new world order. Oh yeah, now I know why you've gotten that rant. I'm sorry. Because, so I'm thinking my whole life, like Russia, Putin's evil, and then I'm starting to meet Russians when I get older, then I'm starting to realize that certain propaganda that we see in our media is wrong. Like,
that we are the shield for the Europe.
But like, there's this one thing that really sticks out to me. This is probably back. It was when Clinton was in office around I want to say 1994, and he had this guy on the front of the Time magazine. Let me see if I can. Time Bosnia concentration camp. Yeah, he had this, like, I remember like walking past this and magazine in the stores. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And then when I got like, oh, when was it? It was about like 2004, maybe. I found this video that this guy named Jared Israel made. He runs a website called The Emperor's New Clothes, and you might find this video on YouTube still. They took it down, but I think someone re-uploaded at least 2 parts of it, and it's got the part where it shows that these people weren't in a concentration camp. The photographers, and it's got the video evidence of it, so it's a video. You can watch them set up the cameras to take the picture, so 100%, like the photographers are the ones behind this barbed wire fence, and I guess it was like a chicken coop or something, and they were sitting in there, and they take that photo, and then you see that, but it makes it look like, oh, he is. If you really look in the distance, and like when I'm watching this video, he's the only guy that looks skinny like that. And this one guy comes and explains, and she goes, why is he skinny? And he's like, and this one guy's like we all not the same. And they're like, this person's built this way, this person's built that way. And so she basically had him come forward, took that picture, and was like, bam. And now you see this, must it go on? Must what go on? What are you implying? Because when I was a kid, everyone who saw that, they automatically thought they were in a concentration camp. And you can see, look at what they put right here. The Balkans, Muslim prisoners in a Serbian detention camp. And so, I mean, like, all the language implies that. And so it's like, and then so when I'm watching this video, I'm starting to realize everything, like and it made me think about how both sides in the media must lie, because you would think like all the pro-Clinton media, like you could see why they might do this, and they want to cover up for Clinton doing all this stuff. But what about Fox News and all these other conservative outlets? Why didn't they ever bring this up? Why didn't they ever talk about this? You would think like, oh, you don't like the Democrats, you think they're dirty and everything. Why don't you expose this? And that was my question after I watched that video for a couple of years. And then it's like I started realizing, when I was helping this guy run for office, I was going to attempt to help him run for office, but he would bash Lincoln. And I was like, man, you're not going to win by bashing Lincoln. You got to have the black vote. But he's like, no, Lincoln's a tyrant. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go look, because it's going to be harder for you to debate me on this if we just use sources just from the 1800s. So I go find all these books, and I find out the Vatican was behind the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. In this book, Rome's responsibility for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by Brigadier General Thomas Harris, who oversaw the trial of the co-conspirators. So this was a person there giving eyewitness account, and he's a brigadier general. And he said all the co-conspirators were Catholic or connected to the Catholic Church. all 10 of them. And he said there was enough evidence to convict the Pope. So I come back to that guy and I'm like, I'm like, oh, here's all this info. And he's like, oh, that was written after the fact. And I didn't say another word. And I just walked away because isn't all history written after the fact? So, but anyway, it started making me realize how both sides could be controlled, because then you look at Fox News and what's it ran by? Rupert Murdoch, a papal knight of St. Gregory, which is a Catholic title. Then you got Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, Laura Ingraham, Ann Coulter. I mean, these are just like the few names I think of right off the top of my head. All four of them Roman Catholic. So then you could start to see, well, Democrat Party seems like it's always been Catholic run, and definitely since like 1840, when the Catholic Church made deals with Democrat politicians to take the Bible out of public schools. And that's in this book called Pope or President, written in 1858, that details that on page 246 to 248. You can find it for free on Google Books. So my thinking is, and then it's like you also watch, like, okay, who's the first Supreme Court guy? Who's the first Catholic on the Supreme Court? Oh, it's gosh, I can't think of his name. I wasn't really prepared to talk about this normally. Oh, Judge Taney. That's it. So you got like Judge Taney, who ruled against Dred Scott. Dred Scott case was like this slavery case. So you got, your first Catholic who basically sides with slavery and supports slavery. He's a Roman Catholic. And, he's a Democrat politician. First president who's Catholic is who? JFK, Roman Catholic, right? So you start to see all these like first, so you can start to really see how like the Democrat Party is pretty much aligned with the Catholic Church for the most part. And, the Catholic Church used to take and try to like have riots, and they wound up killing a few abolitionists. One of them was Elijah Lovejoy, and basically that's what sparked the abolitionist movement. And you would think you would learn about him in public schools, but you don't. I wonder why. Well, they'd probably be like, oh, he was killed by a mob. Well, why did this mob kill him, and who was this mob? Oh, it was a Catholic mob. Oh, what do you mean? The Catholic Church supported slavery and supported the South? And see, all that would start to come up. So you got to be like, we're not going to teach history, kids. No history for you. We're just going to kind of like miss a bunch of parts because, we want to leave the Catholic Church out of it because they start to control the education, right? Because they were the ones that took the Bible out of public schools in 1854. They removed 39. They had the Bible removed from 39 schools and even altered the history books. So right there's your start of it. Your Catholic Church starting to alter all this history to cover up for itself. So that's why, these things don't get reported. Just like no one knows about the Ustasha, which is they were maybe even crueler than the Nazis, and they were ran by the Catholic clergy, and they were doing forced Catholic conversions. And this is only back in World War II. And then you're like, well, okay, that's 80 years ago. Surely they changed now, but they keep doing this. It's like that's why they, it's like. At one time, they were like saying, oh, the Inquisition and those torture instruments, that was so long ago when you were burning Protestants for trying to merely teach their kids the Lord's Prayer in English. So that was so long ago. And then they come to this country and they start doing the same thing, and then some years pass. And it's like, well, that was back in the 1890s. Surely they changed now, and it's like, 40 years later, they're bringing Hitler to power. You had Jorg Lantz, who was a Catholic monk who basically started all the Nazi ideology. He was like right before Hitler, or right at the time of Hitler. And then you got and then it's like, so surely they changed. And it's like, they got that baby stealing scandal where they were taking babies away from parents and giving them to Catholic families. And it's basically people who disagreed with the government, which was ran by Catholics, and they would give it to Catholic families. And this went on from 1940 to 1970, I believe. And I still don't know if there's anything ever, came of that. And but you keep going, oh, they change, and it's like they don't change. It's the same way. It's the same thing. They keep covering up things, and that's why you never hear about this. Didn't mean to get off on that tangent. So I'm going to play this.
My phone rang at 7:30 in the morning on the 24th of February. The dialer was my American friend from my high school days in the US. He was the last person I expected to call, especially at 7:30 in the morning. I knew immediately that the war has actually broken out. The beginning of the war did not surprise me. In fact, it's long overdue. What surprised me was the fact that he knew nothing about the suffering that the Russian Ukrainians had endured over the past 8 years. Let me get something straight. NATO promised that they wouldn't move an inch to the east. That was a lie. And now we are surrounded by an aggressive military alliance. NATO gladly bombed Yugoslavia under the pretenses of potential genocide. Did they bomb just military installations? No. NATO destroyed schools, hospitals, bridges, cultural monuments, private businesses, and industrial plants. Did you forget about that? Did you forget about how NATO pumped money and weapons into Georgia right before Georgia bombarded Russian peacekeepers and civilians? Of course you did, because your media doesn't want you to know. Did you forget how yet another territory was ripped away from Serbia? Do you not remember Kosovo? Did you protest then? I bet you didn't, and I bet you didn't even care. Did you forget the invasion of Libya? If you're in Europe, you can't forget. Thousands of migrants are your daily reminder of what your governments did to that country. Did you protest the illegal invasion of Syria by Turkey and the US? I bet you didn't. Do you care about Saudi Arabia starving Yemen? I bet you don't. Do you care, or did you care, about the illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses? What, they aren't people to you? Why haven't you been vocal against the murder of children and civilians at Iraqi and Afghani weddings by American bombardment? Ah, that's right. They're brown people. They're probably worth less to you. Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev started bombarding Ukrainian Russians in the east simply for doing the exact same thing as the Ukrainians did in the west, was to get rid of a corrupt government? Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev shut off electricity and water to Crimea? Where was your Save the Ukrainian People when 48 civilian anti-Maidan Ukrainian protesters were rounded into a Union trade house and burned alive, whilst those who tried to escape the fiery hell were beaten and shot? Do you by any chance know who the Madonna of Gorlovka is? Do you know what the Alley of Angels memorial is? Let me give you a hint. People engraved into that memorial aren't alive, and they are not adults. Did you shed even one digital virtue signaling tear when the children at the children's beach in Zagreb were purposefully bombed by the Ukrainian military using illegal cluster bombs? I bet you didn't. But that's okay. How would you? Your mainstream media keeps you in the dark. For 8 years, the US and its allies have been pumping billions of dollars worth of lethal weapons into Ukraine. For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been patiently waiting for Kiev to adhere to the Minsk agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? The amount of years that the US spent killing Afghanis. So whilst leaders like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, and Ursula von der Leyen have been virtue signaling about the poor Ukrainians, they have been robbing the Ukrainians of their dignity, making their economy run on loans from the IMF, and basically robbing them of their future. And Russia is to blame when we were their primary trading partner. The West.
Yeah, I know some part he's dropping an F-bomb in here just one time, but I'll anyone wants to see it, it's all in the show notes. But I thought that was good commentary. Let's see here. I think I got one more thing. I gotta make a comment about, like, I got in and talked with a state rep, and at least the state rep talked back to me, and like got after I called him a Nazi for supporting the war. I might actually even wind up donating to the guy because I was like, man, I'll never donate. I'm not going to be donating to you if you support this, and it's complete. Like, I basically feel like you're supporting a Nazi regime. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated, and I kind of simplified it a little bit. But one of the arguments he was trying to have was, Chris, I want the gospel of Jesus to be able to be preached. And so I find this article, and I don't know if I put this in my show notes or not. Man, I probably should. Let me see. I'll just drop it in the main. Oh, hey, Joey. I don't know if you're still listening, but hey, man. But yeah, Vatican's the whore of Babylon. But anyway, I sometimes wonder, because Paul Craig Roberts says Russia's the last remaining Christian country. And you got to think, like in our country, we can't even kids go to school. It's like, am I a boy or a girl? It used to be real easy to figure that out. And now we got kids so confused that like they actually have to they don't know what they are, or they don't know how to say what they are when they are what they are. It's like, and Putin's pretty simple. He's like, a woman is a woman and a man is a man. And it's like, I honestly, this article's real good. I don't want to read the whole thing though. But I got to start feeling like watching all these like COVID tyrants. Remember, these people were like, we were calling them tyrants and Nazis, and it's like suddenly they want to go rush to defend Ukraine, which has all this Nazi symbolism sort of attached to it. Maybe you don't think all of Ukraine's. And I actually got like a more like more to it than that. But anyway, I just think it's kind of odd, that like, all these Nazi COVID tyrants suddenly want to go defend Ukraine, and then everyone wants to rush to it and be like, yeah, let's kill the Russians. It's like, do you ever stop to think that are you really on the right side? Because you were just talking about how these people were Nazis. How are they defending freedom in another country? And look at the oppression we have in our own. And it doesn't make you stop to pause. Like, that blows my mind a little bit. It's like, I can't even it's to the point in America where I can't even ask what the definition of herd immunity is on a YouTube video without getting it banned. And that's all I did, right? I showed them the old definition and the new one, and then I showed them what they define as immunity now. I showed them what they define as a vaccine, and I was like, how do you even make circular logic sense out of this? Like, I couldn't even make, like, even with like circular reasoning, I couldn't even figure out how they make sense of what herd immunity is. So that was just an honest question. It's like I just wanted someone to explain that to me, and that's all the video was. It's like nothing else. I didn't talk bad about the vaccine. I didn't do anything. I just showed definitions and said, could someone explain what herd immunity is? And I get censored. And it's actually even worse than that. That's just one of, thousands of examples. And it's like, you got to be, like, some people are like, am I even allowed to talk about war? I know it's not COVID and everything, but can I even talk about the, and it's like it's getting to the point where you don't know, maybe oh, you disagreed with the state, but anyway, I do want to make sure I make one point before I end this video. Oh yeah, one thing I heard is that they're sending out all these like weapons out to Ukraine, right? And we're talking about millions of dollars of weapons, and I think like 500 million euros are being like invested in all these weapons and sent to Ukraine. And and they're going to be having like javelin rockets pouring in and all these other stuff and all this other stuff, all these other weapons. And you know what? We know what that's for, right? To kill Russians. And there's part of me that wonders is, does it stay on Ukraine soil or does it actually start shooting off into Russia itself? And part of my thinking is, yes, I don't think every single person in Ukraine's a Nazi. I don't think every single person that's not a separatist is a Nazi. And because some people go, well, the guy who's running Ukraine's a Jew, so ha ha ha, you called them Nazis. But why are these groups existing? Why are you letting the United States of America fund them? Why are you putting up with this? Why aren't you calling it out? And my thinking is, because there's some people, that's like confused, like, I just don't even understand. It's like, why do they want to start a war? And what it is I think they want to just use Ukraine. And now they told all those people, hey, everyone from, I think it's like either 16 to 60 or 18 to 60, they gotta stay and fight, all the men. And so let's just say maybe you could get you have all these Ukrainians fighting a war and dying for you to do something to weaken Russia, because I guess that's, part of the goal, try to weaken Russia. And that way you don't have to have the U.S. dying over it. You don't have to have the lashback from like Americans, like, oh, we don't want to go to a war and stuff like that. Well, if you just send guns over to the Ukraine, you don't get the bad lashback from people's sons, not, from people not wanting to send their sons to die in this war. And you can just use the Ukrainians as like a sacrifice and to go after Russia. I mean, it's just, one of my thoughts, because it seems like they really want this war to happen. Like they had plenty of time, plenty of different ways they could have settled this peacefully over the past 8 years. And then you got Trump funding these same people too. So don't think it's just Obama giving these Nazis billions of dollars, and it's also Trump doing it, and now it's Biden. And you got to remember, like, right before Hillary got elected, I remember me and my wife being scared she was going to be elected, because we felt like if she got elected, there was definitely going to be a war. Like, it just, like, to me, it just felt like that, because I remember all that stuff they were doing with Syria, and it just seemed like everyone was getting tired of it, and I could just almost feel like Russia was getting really fed up with it. And because, Russia had to, I think one time I made a video, and I believe it was Syria, that the United States goes into, and this was right before the election, and the U.S. goes in there and starts like killing civilians, from my understanding. And it seemed like Russia went in there and just stopped them from killing civilians. I made a video about it, saying, hey, is this what's going on in there? And that video is what got my channel demonetized. Back in 2016, got it completely demonetized, and I got the video banned and all that. So anyway, I felt like that, like there was a war. A lot of people felt like we were real close to having a war if Hillary would have gotten office. So, Trump, my thinking is maybe Putin was trying to wait, because he knows, okay, there's an election coming up. Let's see who gets elected. Oh, it's Trump. Maybe we can do some deals with him. He's supposed to be this deal maker, but then what do you know? All this Russia collusion talk. Oh, he must be colluding with the Russians. Well, hey, Mr. Putin, I can't do a deal with you. You know how that would look. I got the Democrats accusing me of Russia collusion, which I think that was all orchestrated, because I think the Democrats, are working with Trump, and Trump's working with the Democrats the whole time, because they're all both Vatican puppets. And so Trump gets in there, he lets them call him like says the Russian collusion thing's going on. He gets hit with that continuously, so that gives him an excuse not to even try to do a deal, any kind of deals with Putin. Right? You can just say, hey, they're still doing this. We gotta wait till that case clears up, and then maybe we can do something. Like, I mean, I don't know if that's what was said, but maybe that's going on. Maybe that's part of it. And then suddenly, after 3 years, it finally gets resolved, and then Corona breaks out. And then you can't really do much with Corona, right? Can't really tackle all these problems with, when Corona's happening. And then, right when Trump leaves office, what does he do? He gets rid of the Open Skies Treaty. I think it was like November 22nd of 2020. So let's see here. Now we know we got Biden coming in. We know Biden's almost just like Hillary, going to do the exact same things as Hillary. But now minus the Open Skies Agreement, which seems like Open Skies is where you're allowed to fly non-military jets over someone else's airspace to kind of like surveil everything, to check to see, I guess like weapons and things like that going on, and that's why it's called Open Skies and the Open Skies Treaty. I think that's what it's all for. So here's Trump getting rid of that, and that seems kind of like that's not. I don't know, like that kind of seems like sort of an aggressive thing, because now, we don't even know if you're like building weapons and things, and so and then I guess another thing is that whole depopulation agenda that they seem to have. And they got this jab rolling out, right, that could depopulate people. And, there's part of me that wonders, do they blame some kind of bio attack on Russia when it's really the vaccines that go bad? Or, do they release some kind of chemical agent on us themselves and blame it on Russia? Do they do a cyber attack and blame it on Russia? Or maybe they do all of it and blame it on Russia. And maybe they let nukes go off. And because, these elites have been building underground bunkers and things like that, right? From, some things I read in here. I don't know if it's 100% true. But let's say, they're building bunkers. Well, maybe they know they're about ready to push this to happen. And that's part of the depopulation agenda too. But I kind of thought when, that earlier when Theoria was talking about that FDA giving that warning about a cyber attack and how he said he was warning their employees or the FDA was warning their employees that they might want to stock up on food in case a cyber attack happens. And, part of my whole thinking is, what if they want to cause a war, then have us not be able to communicate, then have a cyber attack go on that leaves the Americans not able to communicate? And what if they plan to pull something while all that chaos is happening? Which I don't have many thoughts about what they could pull, because I think they could pull a lot of different things. But if a cyber attack happens, I don't think it's going to be Russia. I really don't believe it's Russia. And it's just with the Vatican backing Hitler to power, and Hitler was a Nazi. and all that, the Nazi ties to Ukraine. I always wonder if the Vatican has something to do with it. I know one thing: our CIA has something to do with these groups, and our CIA is nicknamed what? Catholics in Action, or the Catholic Intelligence Agency, but normally I hear people call it Catholics in Action. And it was they've had nothing but, well, when the CIA was first formed, they recruited from Catholic universities and Jesuit universities. That's where they got most of their recruits from at the beginning, at least at the top, from what I understand. And then you got them working with the Nazis in Ukraine and these groups, and I just can't help but wonder about that. And this video, I'm really sorry it's not a little bit better. Like I said, I just got off work and I just want to get some thoughts out there, some things I was thinking about on my mind, some videos I was watching. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. I don't want to make this too long. This was long enough. Okay, I'll read some of the comments real quick. It's Joey says Russia is Esau, USA is Jacob, 4 hidden dynasties. I'll have to catch that later. He says Joe Biden armed the enemy very well. It's the systems, not the Christians of their countries. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It says True 45 played his part. Trump played his part. Putin gave Trump that soccer ball. Who, that's the World Health Organization, are the ones getting hit the hardest. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Putin gave Trump that soccer ball. Who are the ones getting hit the hardest? That was the deal to kill off their own people. They are the hybrids, flesh, no soul. Yeah, I don't know about the Russian Esau part. I know one thing. Okay, that's a good point, though. I'm glad you made me remember the one thing that's also important to talk about. Part of the reason why people are demonizing Russia is there's one clip I will play, because I mean, these people, I think, framed Russia in a pretty good light, and I think he's got like some pretty good truth to it. But you got a lot of ministers out there that teach a lot of bad Bible prophecy, and they will twist Putin into being some kind of like evil leader according to their Bible prophecy, like Ezekiel 38. I think that's the one, and they're talking about like the king of the north and saying it's Russia, and they're going to do all this stuff. And so, I mean, it's like sometimes I think like people use the Bible to demonize Putin in a way. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, people can leave me some clips or something if you really think Putin's evil. But like, I haven't really researched him real hard, but I see like just his speeches, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, we got some real psychos in our country, and it's real hard for me to compare what I'm seeing in my own country and then look at Putin and be like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's horrible. He's lost his mind. It's because it's like I see some really bad stuff in our country, and our country doesn't seem like they really care. I mean, like, we tested atomic bombs on like these people at Bikini Island. I've never seen one president be like, oh, we got to do more for those people. I mean, I think this one documentary had them like, hey, you get to mow our grass at our golf course, and then you can go back to your crap hole that you're living in. It just slapped like, just, it was just like the most disgusting, like, oh gosh, I can't. I don't know how to frame it in the right words. Like, I don't know, like this like disgusting elitism, you know, it's like, I mean, how would you just do this to people, do this to their island, and then you're going to have them like take care of your golf courses and your tennis courses, and then like, I don't know, like it just doesn't seem like our government really cares about these people. I think they were also might be using it for a dump, like a trash dump too. So their little place gets to be all nice and clean, and golf courses and tennis courses, and these people that had a bomb dropped on them, you know, get to live basically in a garbage dump. But yeah, let me play this on video. Let me see. Sorry, it's taking me a second. I'm gonna have to shoot. Okay, yeah, here it is. Go to the.
So much to unpack, but I feel like maybe the first thing to do is just react to this statement from NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg that just came out about an hour ago. So I'm going to play it, and I want to kind of get your reaction, and we can go from there. So let me just pull it up. Here we go. Everyone can see that. All right. So here's NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. This was 2 hours ago.
Infrastructure from allies that joined after 1997. We are facing a new normal in European security, where Russia openly contests the European security order and uses force to pursue its objectives. The world will hold Russia and Belarus accountable for their actions. Russia as the aggressor, Belarus as the enabler. President Putin's decision to pursue his aggression against Ukraine is a terrible strategic mistake, for which Russia would pay a severe price for years to come.
Okay, so, you know, I mean, you heard the term there, new normal. We're facing a new normal in European security. That's according to the head of NATO. That seems like a pretty powerful, important statement. What do you think of that, Scott?
Well, it's not the first time I've heard it, and the person that I heard it from for the first time wasn't Jens Stoltenberg. It was Vladimir Putin when he spoke to the Munich Security Conference back in 2007, when he challenged the unitary world order led by the United States in a single polar world. And he said, no, that days is gone. That ship has sailed. There is a new world order and a need for a new European security order that goes beyond the NATO concept. And Putin put the marker on the table. He said, what you're doing here is wrong. People keep saying, Russia's the aggressor. They had no choice. What do you call an ostensibly defensive military alliance, which lies about its intentions to expand in a post-Cold War era, and then goes on the offensive, bombing a European capital, Belgrade? I mean, everybody's sitting there going, oh, Kiev is being bombed, first time in Europe. No, NATO bombed Belgrade without any authority from the Security Council, in violation of international law, doing the exact same thing that they're accusing Russia of doing now. NATO said, oh, you can't create these independent states of Lugansk and Donetsk. Oh, yes, you can, because you guys created the independent state of Kosovo, carved it right out of Serbia, again, with no founding in international law, nothing. And then NATO went on to basically legitimize the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq, even though NATO as an organization didn't participate. Several NATO members did. And in 2004, a few months after the occupation, NATO legitimized the occupation by creating the NATO training mission in Iraq. NATO went into Afghanistan. How does a North Atlantic Treaty Organization end up in Afghanistan? NATO bombed Libya for the sole purpose of achieving regime change. And so now Russia's looking at this saying, we're not happy with this offensive military organization, which is expanding to our borders. And every time they absorb a member, what happens? They automatically get covered by the shroud of Article 5, which means that if Russia took action against one nation who might overstep their boundary, let's say a Baltic state who has a grudge to bear, or Poland, who definitely has a burr in their saddle about Russia, all of NATO is supposed to come in. That is a threat. That is an existential threat for Russia. And so, when Stoltenberg says a new, European security order is being promulgated by Russia, he's right. Russia's fed up with this. That's why Russia said, y'all got to go back to 1997 borders before you started expanding. That doesn't mean that you dismantle NATO. Russia's not calling for the dismantlement of NATO. What they're saying, though, is all those British troops, French troops, American troops that are currently deployed in Poland into the Baltic states got to go home, get away from our borders. And Russia, I think what this Ukraine situation, again, let me just start by saying this is a tragedy. Anytime there's a war, it's a human tragedy. I'm not sitting here cheering for war. It's literally the worst possible option. But they teach you in martial arts that when you get in a fight with someone and you back them into a corner, they're going to kick your butt because they got nothing to lose. Russia literally was backed into a corner. And so Russia is responding the only way they can. And people are only talking today about Ukraine. This is about Ukraine. This is about Russia denying Ukraine NATO member. No, this is about a new order in Europe. NATO refuses to engage Russia on the topic of returning to 1997 borders and all this. They say it's unthinkable to even engage that way. Well, Russia's changing the geopolitical reality. They've already changed it with Belarus. If you recall, 2 years ago, everybody was talking about Belarus being plucked away from Russia by Europe. Mike Pompeo visited and sold them liquid natural gas. And there was a color revolution that was going to happen after the August 2020 election. And what happened since then? Belarus is a Russian client state right now. Russia took one of their elite offensive organizations, the First Guards Tank Army, and permanently redeployed it to Belarus so that it threatens NATO right now. And what is going to happen after they defeat Ukraine? If they defeat Ukraine, same thing. They're going to turn Ukraine into a client state with Russian offensive strike capability there. They're recreating the Cold War boundary that formerly existed in the border between West and East Germany. This time they're putting that boundary on the Ukraine border all the way up through Belarus. And then they're going to sit there and stare NATO down. Now, Russia has spent the last 20 years building one of the premier combined armies the world has ever seen. And we're seeing it in Ukraine. I know there's people watching say, oh, they're getting their butts kicked. It's day two. Don't take your news off of Twitter or social media. And I also ask people, how many briefings has the Russian Ministry of Defense given to update the world on what's going on? None, because they don't care. They're doing their plan on their timetable. They don't care about us. They've given up. The day of trying to convince the West to become mature about this is over. But when this is done, Russia will have their military on NATO's border, not on their border. And now NATO is going to have to decide, do we want to modernize? Do we want to spend $100 billion recreating that which we dismantled after the end of the Cold War? And I'm fairly certain that the vast majority of Europe is going to say no. And the beauty of Europe right now is that most of these leaders are democratically elected, which means they're beholden to a constituency. Europe's at a disadvantage here. You know that, right? Putin is a guy who's been in power for 2 decades, and he's going to be in power for at least a decade and a half more. That's continuity of policy. Europe, on the other hand, is ruled by political leaders who get voted out of office. And every time they get voted out of office, a new political party comes in with new policies. So they're seesawing back and forth. Same thing with the United States. Putin has dealt with 5 American presidents, all of whom had a different policy towards Russia. Putin's had the same policy. So Putin has the luxury of knowing that over the course of the next decade, this policy is not going to change. Europe and the United States, on the other hand, are. And especially when these sanctions kick back and start hurting Americans, when gas prices go through the roof, when our inflation rate hits 12%, when European economy collapses, and then as a result, our markets collapse. James Carville once famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." Americans can't even tell you where Ukraine is on a map. And they're going to sit there and
I tell you what, one thing I will disagree with him on, though, is he makes it sound like when this new party comes in, it's going to be something different. But in my, I don't feel like anything's different. Anything policies don't change from one president to another. They look like they change, at least in America. They look like they change, and I imagine it's like this everywhere else. I know it's definitely like this in Canada. They look like they change, but they got this script that they're following. Trump had in America, you could not have Hillary lock us down for COVID, but we knew that they had this plan. You can look at all these documents and everything, and you can tell they were planning on pulling this COVID pandemic, or whatever you want to call it. You could tell that they were planning this. This is well planned. But if Hillary would have tried to do it, she wouldn't have been able to lock people down. They would have been skeptical of the vaccines. They would have been questioning her even more. And it's like they would have been like, "Oh, she's trying to take away our freedom." And it's like, you could only imagine. They think not everyone I know who voted for Trump is saying the vaccine is the mark of the beast, because, well, it was Trump that gave them the vaccine, so it can't be the mark of the beast, but some people feel like it is, but not all of them. But if had Hillary did this and it looked all fishy like it looks, I think people would have been much quicker to be like, whoa, locking us down, now you're creating this vaccine, you're going to do it at a record speed. But when Trump was doing it, hey, it's Trump in warp speed, and he's doing it, man. And it's like, well, there was a lot of people that are skeptical of it and a lot of people suspicious of it, but it wasn't the same kind of push had it just been Hillary doing it. Because it's like, what it did was, you got the Democrats that just believe pretty much anything they hear on the TV and news, just as long as it's someone from the Democrat Party. They're just like, well, there can't possibly be this world collusion and all this other stuff. That just is beyond their minds to even consider for most of them. And the Republicans, on the other hand, are a little bit more open and watching out for that. It's more of your Christian population. They're reading their Bibles, not all of them, but I mean, you have a bigger percent of it. But if you want to take in okay, we already got this side, they're pretty much, all we got to do is just put some stuff on TV, drag a few people on TV, say they're doctors and experts, and the Democrats will believe it. But now what do we do for the Republicans? We can do that, but Hillary, they ain't going to go for it with Hillary. But Trump, you're at least going to get some of them to go along, and that's why they had to have Trump. So when this guy says, they go from one policy to the next, and it's not stable, but Putin, on the other hand, is always going to be there. It ain't quite it, man. It's like they got this whole smoke and mirrors going on in America, where the Vatican's the hand controlling it. And I got plenty of links, plenty of books. If anyone ever is new to this and they want me to go into detail, I can easily prove this. The Vatican's controlling both parties. They got everything scripted, even since, I don't know how long they've been doing this script for, but I know they at least had this whole COVID thing planned for at least a good 20 years or more. At least, the very least. It was before they did 9/11. They already had this COVID thing planned. So, and they already had Trump planned to be the president and everything. And I'm like 100% convinced of that. I mean, there might be like a little tiny bit if someone had something really, really hardcore, maybe you could convince me, but I'm pretty sure that they had this plan for at least over 20 years. And so anyway, that's just the part I'll disagree with that guy about.
And watch their economy tank because of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack about what you just talked about. A really kind of concise history of how the kind of geopolitical shift that we've seen in the Putin era, basically this century, this millennium to this point, and it seems like we're kind of at a watershed moment.
You know what? I got this linked in my show notes, so I'll just kind of like answer some of the questions. I know. Okay. Finicky, I'll just say 07. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but anyway, they say Ukraine wants to be in NATO because Russia is an imperialist and a dangerous country. Me personally, I don't. I just don't feel that way about Russia. I mean, I look at America and I go, man, America's imperialistic. I mean, basically everything people are saying about Russia, oh, they're imperialistic and dangerous. What about America, man? Do you see all these people we kill and all these regimes we fund, and we look the other way for Saudi Arabia, and bombing Yemen and doing all that stuff to Yemen? And I mean, like, I don't like, don't we seem kind of imperialistic? I mean, just because we're not like, oh, here's a new American state, here's the state of Mexico and here's the state of this. We don't need to. We're ruled by the Vatican. As long as the Vatican's got control of these Catholics, in all these countries and all these other puppets they got, it doesn't, like, U.S. doesn't need to be real imperialistic. They just need to do the Vatican's bidding by having all these wars, which the CIA has their hand in, which is ran by the Roman Catholics. So they just sit there and go, hey, we're going to orchestrate this war here, this uprising here, this thing over here, and we're going to work all the parts for our benefit, all towards their one world order, which the Vatican believes God gave them the keys, the spiritual keys and the keys temporally to rule over all the earth. That, they believe they have the 100% right to, but but I think deep down they know God didn't really do it, because I think the Pope knows he's the Antichrist. I don't think the Pope's disillusioned about that, and I think they just have this thing where I want to rule the whole world. I want this power. I want, and I think it's also moved by a spirit, because but like they just give themselves over to a spirit, because some things just don't ever make sense to me about evil, because it's like, well, I'll say, like, if a person wanted to be powerful or a person wanted to have a good life, the best thing you can do is make all the other people around you better. And then, like, okay, like free speech, that lets people be more inventive because they can have freer communication to be, talk to each other, and they get more innovative, and they like create a better society. But like, if you start having poor people and you make everyone poor, okay, here's a kid sweating at a sweatshop 16 hours a day, never can develop his mind. But what if this kid could have invented something great? He wanted to go to college, but he can't go to college because he's so poor. He has to, dig minerals out of the ground, for cars and everything like that. And he's doing that 6 hours a day, or making shoes, 16 hours a day, making shoes and whatever, and barely being able to eat. And it's like, there's all this human potential that gets wasted by being so tyrannical. And obviously it's, so it's like, there's got to be something more to just, I want power and control, because you would think, well, don't you want a better life? Or are you just content in having so much power and control to the detriment of your own life? And that's why I also think, there's got to be something spiritual here where they're feeding on something spiritual to drive them to do this, because it just doesn't make any sense to me from even from a worldly perspective, like a purely worldly perspective. It's like you would want to help people better themselves to have a better life for yourself. And so if you're going to keep people down, you're kind of keeping yourself down. So it's like, so I always think there's something more to that. And the Bible does say, from what I understand, that the Pope's the Antichrist, and man, it sure looks like it. But so anyway, 7 says, I'm born in a Muslim country, but I'm atheist, but I don't believe the government rules. I can believe the anarchist Bible or Quran rules without taxes. There's not a good government that rules the world. Biden is more worried about climate changing, and he don't worry about nuclear climate changing. Yeah, see, that's the thing too. It's like, see, this topic might be a little bit new for you, but if you look at everything the Pope pushes, climate change, open borders, gun control, homosexuality, because it's like, if it wasn't for the Catholic Church, chances are homosexuals probably could not adopt. But they had this Pope called, what was his name? He was called the Smiling Pope. I think it was Pope John, if I'm not mistaken. And I think before he became Pope John, he was like Pope Luciani. And he started having all this doctrine about, gay couples should be able to have, adopt children and all this other stuff. Like, I think he completely paved the way for that whole thing. And the Catholic Church has problems, with pedophilia all the time, and just moving the priests all around doesn't seem to bother them. I think it was the number 3 guy at the Vatican, George Pell, which is like their main financial guy, I believe. He got in trouble for pedophilia, and he actually went to court and was convicted of it. And then he had a second trial without a jury. It was just a closed circuit court of judges, and they found him innocent and let him go. But he wasn't innocent. It's very hard to get someone of that stature into court in the first place, let alone getting them convicted. And it just shows you the power and corruption the Vatican has, that they would even help that guy get away. And they pulled strings in the media and everything to frame his case differently. And it's nothing that just George Pell could do himself. He had to have help, and the Vatican had to be helping him do all this, and probably pulled strings to get that closed circuit court of judges. So but anyway, but you see how the Democrat Party, it seems like they want to basically blur the lines of everything, trans this, trans that. It's all about blurring lines to them. And when you can start to have all these blurry lines, it's like the age lines get blurry, everything gets blurry. It's like, well, if a kid can decide to get themselves vaccinated, why can't have a medical procedure? Like, they can even hey, you want to be a boy or a girl, and here they are, and they're in their formulative ages. But the Democrats are like, oh, there's no problem to that. Well, obviously, if a kid can go have some kind of genital mutilation and sign up for that, and sign up to get his body altered, surely the kid can go ahead and make a sexual decision, right? Because that's for both of those, that gender transformation can be permanent. But the Democrat Party got no problem with it, and so obviously they're not going to have problems with pedophilia either, which is the Vatican's all involved in. And so you can see how like the Democrat Party and the Vatican so closely aligned, and now you start seeing more of these rhino Republicans like Paul Ryan, and they seem to have not too much problem with all this either, and they're Roman Catholics, and when you start looking at all your more rhino Republicans, they always have that tie with the Catholic Church. Reagan certainly was that too. Reagan passed amnesty, and it really helped change California to be California the way it is today. Because all those illegals, well, the Catholic Church says you're going to vote Catholic, you're going to vote for the Democrats, and some of them are like, but they believe in abortion. But I've read several of their web pages, and they go, and you can read these little Catholics, and they'll be like, but the abortion thing really bothers me. They go, but the Democrat Party best represents our Catholic social teaching. And you got to think Catholic social teaching, socialism, they kind of seem pretty similar to me. Nazis, what were they? The National Social, weren't they National Socialist, like a socialist party? This guy named Tick does this good video, TIK, and then history. It's all one word on YouTube, and it's called "Was Hitler a Socialist?" And he pretty much definitely proves that Hitler was a socialist. And it makes sense to me because, the Vatican pushes all this social doctrine. They praise China for their social credit system. You can see bishops praising China for that social credit system that China's got. And so all these things that you see the Democrat Party push that you associate with the Democrats, just so happens that the Vatican's pushing it too. And then when you see other Republicans do it, and then you look about, this Republican's calling the Pope Holy Father and everything. And it's like, the Bible says, call no man father, and you're calling him Holy Father. It's kind of like you're calling him that man God when you start adding that holy word to it. And you should, but I mean, you're calling him another man father who isn't even your father. And the Bible says, don't call no man father. And now you add holy to it. I think you're like really like doubling down on it. And so you got to wonder, okay, and this guy's also the Vatican in 1929, it became a sovereign state, recognized as a sovereign state. So now you're calling a guy Holy Father that's ruling over another country, another government. So it's kind of like, what if Putin was suddenly the, I can't think of what the name of that's called for the Orthodox Church. But what if he was like the Pope of the Orthodox Church, and they said, hey, now Russia's, just like Vatican, you got Vatican, and now we got Russia, and Putin's the Pope of the Orthodox Church, and I'm sitting there calling him Holy Father. Do you think the Democrats would freak out about that? Oh my gosh, you're calling holy, but wait a minute. But if I can call, why can't I call Putin Holy Father, but you can call the Pope Holy Father? They're both foreign leaders of another country, and the Vatican's got a history of being hostile to us. The Vatican even blew Lincoln's brains out. So, but boy, I did not mean to get off on that. Okay, you said you don't know the Christian religion, you never read the Bible, or you're going to go to hell. Look, man, you can see people dying all around you. We're on the verge of World War, but even if we weren't on the verge of World War, just, I see that I see all these graves. Now, my whole thing is, there's either no God, or why does God allow people to die? And why does God let people get old? And getting old, there's some suffering too when I watch people grow old and die. I mean, that's like a prolonged process, It's like you got all these aches and pains when you're old. I'm not gotten old yet. I don't plan to get old. But let's say, like, I see all these other people getting old and they complain about all these pains and aches and their bones are drying up. And it's like, really, why would God do that to someone? Why would a loving God do that to somebody? Why would a loving God, if there's a God, why would he allow all this stuff to go on in the world? And it's like, so, either there's only two logical things: either there's no God, or maybe, God's super evil, or maybe there's a loving God. He created everything perfectly, and man did something to mess things up, and now the world's the way it is. And to me, it's option number 3 makes the most sense, because I don't know, it's like, it just doesn't make sense for like an all-powerful being to sit there and just be like, oh, I'm just going to make people suffer for no reason. I think like people probably created that reason themselves by doing something to offend God. And so I start thinking about the Bible, and I'm like, well, that part of it makes sense. I can see how, God gave you some rules. And it's like, why are things bad? It's like when you look at an animal, if an animal does something, kills another animal, I don't personally go, oh, that animal's bad, But now a human, everyone seems to automatically, like, a human stabs another human that wasn't doing nothing. You're like, wow, that looks bad. Stealing, you think stealing's bad, you think lying's bad. And if you think about the Bible, it says man was created in God's image. So, okay, so if I'm creating God's image and I lie, but God's truth, then I made the image of God look like a liar. So I can see how that's sin, because I'm the image of God, but now I'm making God look like all these bad things. I'm stealing, I'm killing, and God's life, God's love. And so to me, like, even the whole thing about sin makes sense if I'm creating God's image, and it makes right and wrong. But I've never had an atheist be able to explain to me, right and wrong. Why are you crying? If someone kills your mom, I don't understand. What's right and wrong? It's like, what would make that wrong? I mean, maybe you don't like it, but just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's wrong. Where do you get off calling something wrong? Where do you get off, throwing down your reality? And then if you get mad at someone, well, why are you going to go hit someone for killing your mom for? Why don't you, do you like violence or something? I mean, why are you going to go attack them? And it's like, well, they hurt my feelings. And it's like, so why are your feelings hurt? I mean, what does that life even mean? And in a grand scheme of things, it's just going to turn to dust. And it was just an accident anyway. It's like you supposedly just an accident that happened out of the ground somehow, magically happened. Like, you get into intelligent design and things, it's like, well, I see if I saw a computer, you can just tell by the design that someone had to make it, by all the way the keys are placed on it, everything's shaped a certain way. You would not think like, wow, this building exploded that had plastic and wire and it created a computer. If I find this on the ground, I'm not thinking like, oh, this came from an explosion or something. And even if there was like an explosion that happened like a million times a day, I'm still not going to think there's going to be something that's going to make a computer out of it. So it's like, how does that design happen? So you can just look around and tell that, something made us, God made us. There has to be something that made us. And then you just start, thinking about, well, why were you made? And you got to have some kind of purpose. This God had to have some kind of purpose to make you. And I don't know. And I just don't think a loving God. I think this God is love. And like I said, it just doesn't make much sense to me unless, for this whole world to be suffering the way it is. Because, wouldn't that God be like your father? And would your father just let all this stuff happen? Or is it that man's got free will and they decide to sin against God, and this is the result of it? And then, people would be like, well, why did this happen to this innocent person? And, well, it didn't have to happen. I mean, if mankind didn't turn away from God, this is just that playing out, that rebellion against God and turning away from God. And it didn't have to play out this way. And you can see it today. It's like people, it's like they know something's going on, they'll just believe a lie. Like, you got Donald Trump, it's like, because it's too overwhelming for someone to believe that Donald Trump could possibly have something to do with locking them down, or a vaccine that's ruining their life, or killing them, or kill their kid. They're not going to blame Donald Trump for it, even though his hands are all over it. He signed everything, but they don't want to believe that because that's not a very comfortable thing to believe. So they're going to believe he's the good guy. They got no reason to believe it. They just believe it out of comfort. They believe a lie out of comfort. So it's like, people choose, lies to believe out of comfort. That's why I call it like the demonic matrix. And you can be in that matrix the moment you believe that a single lie, or bam, you're in that matrix. And you're controlled by it. And the only way you're going to get out of it is to find the truth. But everybody lies to themselves. There's almost everybody lies to themselves. Because it's like they pick comfort. They pick what makes them feel good. This gives me emotional pain, so they're gonna choose to believe this. Oh, this is so overwhelming. If this was true, I don't even know how I would deal with it, so I'm just gonna believe a lie. They think it's depressing. It's gonna change their life, turn their life upside down. It's gonna ruin a relationship. Oh, if I believe this, my family member believes that, and if I believe this to be true about God, like I keep the Sabbath, there's like so many people and friends just off of believing the Sabbath, like you rest, and every 7 days you rest, just like God said you rest every 7 days. Man, dude, that, like, a lot of Christians even give me a ton of hate over that, or so-called Christians. They give me a ton of hate over that. Like, oh, you can't possibly be saved. You believe in all 10 commandments. You're Judaizing. You're going to go to hell. I mean, like, and God said, in the Bible, it says, if you love me, keep my commandments. It doesn't say do away with them. It says keep them. And here you got these people seeing what they can get rid of, So, my whole thing is, who you better look at that Bible yourself and compare and treat that Bible like it's light. And okay, it's just like in light, you might see something and you might not, this might be something new to you. You've never seen this object before. And you have someone else come up to you and they explain that object to you. But you got the light on and it's like, okay, I can see how it is. And after you start interacting with that object, you're like, well, okay, it's doing exactly what that person's doing. It must be this. And it's kind of like the Bible works the same way. It's like, people will tell you something and it's like, well, okay, well, if the Bible says it, but you got to check it with the Bible, to like check it with your own eyes and really see, it's like you can listen to a preacher or something, but you need to like double check it in the Bible to make sure what he's saying is actually true. And then you just got different phases of darkness, you got where people don't have so much light on, and when it's a little darker, you can get away with a little bit more stuff. And I don't know. I'm a little tired. I need to just cut this off because I'm just kind of babbling. I don't think I'm doing very well right now. So I'm just going to kind of end it. Yeah, I like to read all this, but man, I got to get to bed. But, oh, what about aliens? Do aliens go to hell? Oh, man. I don't believe in aliens, and I think in the Bible there are no aliens. Whatever those aliens are demons. In the Bible there cannot be aliens because God basically created humans in His image. What would the aliens be? The aliens, if they're not created in God's image, they would be like animals, right? I mean, or if they're not like the animals, then they got to be angels, because that's the only other thing He created. He created humans, animals, and angels. And so oh man, I had a really good explanation why he would not create, like, why there would not be aliens. I guess it's like the whole, like, well, okay, so if he didn't have no one to die for the aliens, because he you know, he came in basically the image of man when Jesus came, and Jesus went on the cross and died for everyone's sin so they could have eternal life. Wouldn't he have to come and like be incarnated in an alien? But what did that alien race do? It's like, and it doesn't really make sense, because the whole point of man, well, gosh, I'm gonna get way. You know what? I need to stop. I just need to stop, because I want to phrase things, but I don't want to phrase them incorrectly. So I'm just gonna cover that some other time, because that's just gonna take too long. I'm not gonna do it justice. But yeah, hey, yeah, and I'm sorry, man. I didn't interact with you guys a little bit more, but I just kind of want to jam this video out there, man. I didn't really mean to go on about, I don't know, hopefully I didn't get too off track with everything. But watch that Oliver Stone documentary called Ukraine on Fire. I think someone just uploaded it about 6 months ago on YouTube. I'm not sure how old it is, but that's really good. And that part, I wish I had it up on my screen, though. I actually did have that one Bosnia hoax video, though, that I was talking about earlier, in that Time Life magazine, where those people, like, here's that camera crew. Like, those people are walking around. See, they're setting up, man. They're not all starving. You can see this guy's he's meaty. Everyone's got some meat on their bones. But anyway, that's what it was. It was a storage area. Then you have barbed wire fence, and all the refugees were walking around outside of here. But I mean, this is the name of the video. If anyone wants to watch it, it's on this guy's channel, Jared Israel. It was the one video that woke me up a lot, man. It made me realize that both Democrats and Republicans and all of our media is controlled, because if they're not going to expose Clinton for getting involved in Bosnia and dropping bombs and everything, you're not going to expose that. And you know this hoax is going on, and they had to know it was going on. You know, it just tells you how controlled our media is, because wouldn't you like to, you know, stick it to Clinton and, oh, look, you are evil. Look what you're doing. You're dropping bombs and you're lying. And it's like, it's just real suspicious that, you know, that was never brought up. Oh, okay. I wonder if they got that one part in here. Right, basically, or like
Ukraine were heating up. The new Ukrainian government didn't have the power to wage war on too many fronts. If Odessa were to join the growing uprising in the eastern regions, it would seriously complicate the situation. This rebellion had to be extinguished immediately and at any cost, and that cost was high.
Okay, so basically you had like protesters that were protesting against, they were like the anti-Maidan. Then you had and then you started having these counter protesters come in that were pro-Maidan.
On May 2nd, 2014, soccer fans flocked to the center of Odessa City for the Ukrainian championship match. Surprisingly, a great number of these fans who descended into Odessa just the night before also turned out to be fighters from the Maidan self-defense units, along with members of radical organizations from all parts of Ukraine. These fans, masked, armed, and shouting nationalist mottos, began disturbances in the center of the city as they marched to the anti-Maidan tent encampment, where they attacked. The anti-Maidan protesters sought shelter in the trade union house, but it was a trap. Maidan supporters started throwing Molotov cocktails into the building until it was engulfed in flames. People burned to death inside, or, trying to escape, jumped from the windows. Although a fire station was less than a mile away, it took almost half an hour for firefighters to arrive. When they finally did, the damage had been done.
Now they're cheering and everything.
But here's an intriguing fact. Just a few days before those dreadful events, a messenger from Maidan, Andrei Perubi, made a visit to Odessa. It's an interesting coincidence that some of the people he met with in Odessa were seen at the scene that fateful day.
And I think he was shooting at the people trying to escape.
But not everyone was mourning. On the popular political talk show Schuster Live, the news about the people burnt alive in Odessa was welcomed with a long round of applause.
Из погибших в пожаре в Одессе 15 граждан России, 10 из Приднестровья и ни одного одессита.
On its Facebook page, the right sector announced the events of May 2nd, a proud moment in national history. An official investigation into this sad event has been going on now for nearly 2 years, and it's yet to reach a conclusion.
So, see, that's the one thing. You see all those people on TV just clapping, and it's like, they keep trying to make it sound like, oh, it's just a couple of people. Dude, here it is on TV, and they're all clapping. It's like, dude, this is more than just a couple of thousand people, or it's just a little fringe group. That's what they keep trying to say, but I mean, it's a lie. So, but anyway, man, I'm going. But see, I don't even think Russia's Nazi anymore. I got this guy saying, Serb people are neo-Nazi, Putin is neo-Nazi. I think fascism and communism is the same because Stalin killed so many people, Hitler too. I mean, to me, yeah, it's kind of all the same. I mean, I think there's a very blurry line between socialism, fascism, and communism. But I don't even think Russia's. I'll just look this up real quick. I'm pretty sure they're not. Is Russia? Okay, it says today the state bureaucracy and the capitalist bureaucracy are merged into one. That is the upshot of the great socialist revolution brought about by the Bolsheviks. It constitutes the most oppressive of all despotisms. It doesn't say. Let me see here. I just says it's a mixed economy. Also, some experts say Russia is a state capitalist economy, and some say it's a mixed market. Probably would be like just a little mix of socialism, maybe, but not probably more capitalistic than socialist. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that just think they're just straight up the same Bolshevik communism, and that they were been for almost that they were back in the time of Hitler and everything, and it's not really the same. So, or back in the time of Stalin, I should say. So Joey says 1/3 of the Russian government is Duma. But yeah, hey man, I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna hit the end button, man. I don't mean to keep going.